A Captain and a Madman by RazielZonoran. Chapter 3, Trouble Brewing. One thing I've got to ask, Riker said, is whether anyone else is getting the damnedest sense of déjà vu. The senior staff had assembled for a briefing in the conference lounge, though they'd had another such briefing less than 6 hours earlier, to fine-tune the logistics relating to their mission to Alcharon V. This one had been arranged for a much more specific, and far more unusual, reason. Data frowned, just a little. I will confess that many of our conferences are quite similar in layout. I've noticed that Lieutenant Worf has seated in that precise chair more than 75% of the. Not the meeting, data, Riker corrected, I mean, this. Dr. Picard was in the midst of massaging his temples with one hand, but he managed a wan smile. I presume you're referring to our illustrious visitor not too long ago, Mr. Rasmussen. Exactly, Riker agreed, spreading his hands as if in supplication. Both of them very eccentric men in little ships, loosely speaking, that are supposedly capable of time travel. Both ending up on the Enterprise, both claiming they'd like background information, of one sort or another, both acting like they own the place, neither giving us a single piece of useful information, just more and more questions. Only Rasmussen turned out to be a con man from the past, so how can we be sure that this doctor doesn't have some ulterior motive? Picard thought about it for a moment before replying, I will confess, both have similarities. Both talk too much, Worf muttered under his breath. But at the same time, the captain continued, Rasmussen came with a seemingly legitimate, if unusual, explanation for his presence. He had an indisputably advanced vessel, knowledge of who we all were and of the Enterprise, enough evidence to create an adequate cover, as any competent conman would need. This doctor, on the other hand, has a story, an origin, a very methodology and style that all seem to scream impossibility. It's as if he stepped from a child's bedtime story, a madman with a magic box. If someone wished to deceive us, there are certainly more reasonable ways to go about it. There is another possibility, Worf rumbled, Q. The thought occurred to me, Mr. Worf, Picard admitted, actually, the thought occurs to me whenever anything unusual happens. But it is unlike Q to work behind the scenes like this. He usually likes to flaunt his actions, proudly claim responsibility for them. This sort of deception would be uncharacteristic of him. So, what? Riker asked, running a hand across his jaw. We're just going to accept that we're being visited by a bowtie-wearing time traveler in a wooden box from another dimension. I think, Picard said slowly, until we have evidence to directly contradict his story, we have to at least take some of what he says on faith, though we should not drop our guard just yet. Dr. Crusher, what precisely did your examination reveal? What is he? I honestly don't know what to call him, Crusher admitted, settling back into her chair. He seems perfectly human on the outside, but medical scans show a completely alien biology, unlike anything I've encountered before. 2 hearts, cerebral activity completely off the charts, a metabolism that seems to require very little food. There are organs and neurological structures that I can't even begin to guess at, some of which might even hint at telepathic ability. Even a DNA analysis is raising more questions than it's answering. It's almost as if his genetic code's been repeatedly torn apart and stitched back together in a different sequence, as it's littered with fragmented genomes, and in a constant state of flux. Even more bizarre than that, however, are the trace amounts of radiation in his tissue. Radiation. Picard stiffened a little. Is it a danger? I don't think so, she replied, shaking her head. I ran an analysis on the energy pattern. There isn't an exact match for it, but it did include traces of chronoton particles. They're infused into every cell in his body, somehow. I can't even begin to guess as to the effect it would have on him, or how it got there. I see. Clearing his throat, Picard turned to face his chief engineer. What have you learned about his vessel? Well, we're still not sure if it even is a ship, Captain, LaForgue added, climbing to his feet and activating the wall monitor. A wireframe schematic of the strange box appeared. Every scan we've tried running says it's just a wooden box. Not even my visor's picking up anything unusual, except for 2 things. First, the box is blue, but I'm not picking up any traces of paint. Nothing lead-based, acrylic, anything to explain the color. It's as if the wood itself just grew that shade. For that matter, the grain of the wood doesn't match anything on file. It doesn't even seem to have a consistent grain. as if someone just decided, wood, without specifying the species of tree it came from. No evidence of nails, bolts, not even adhesive, nothing to explain what keeps it together. Second is the fact that I can't pick up any sort of emissions or trace particles to clue me in as to what's inside. The door seems to have a primitive 20th century locking mechanism, but the lock. Captain, the first scan told me there were 807 tumblers inside it. The second scan told me there weren't any at all. The third one said the door wasn't even there. I don't think we're going to be able to get past that lock without the key, assuming it even uses a proper key, and I can't say what would happen if we tried to force our way inside. If the door is indeed constructed of wood, Worf suggested, a phaser could cut through it without difficulty. Captain, Data interjected before Picard could respond to that, I would not recommend attempting to breach its hull. The spatial distortions I had previously detected are still present, and I cannot predict what would occur if we were to rupture its surface. Picard nodded slowly at that, hands folded on the table in front of him. He was silent for a brief moment, then settled back in his chair, tugging at his uniform top as he came to a decision. Agreed. Besides which, our guest has shown no hostile intent as of yet. I believe breaking down his front door isn't warranted, not as things currently stand. For now, we'll keep him confined to quarters, Picard decided, at least until we have a better idea as to just what he wants, or what he is capable of. Mr. Worf, post a constant security detail around his vessel, have them remain alert for any activity that might suggest he was not the sole occupant. Aye, sir, the Klingon rumbled. Counselor, Picard continued, we still have a little time before we reach our destination. I would like you to pay him a visit. You had said earlier that his agitation was preventing you from reading too deeply. If he's settled down, then I would like to see what you can learn. I shall do my best, Captain. Troi replied, inclining her head slightly. Excellent. Picard climbed to his feet, and the rest of the bridge officers followed suit. The rest of you, prepare for our primary objective. I want the first engineering and medical teams beaming down within moments of our arrival. But first, lest anyone misinterpret, I would like to reiterate that this doctor, though certainly a mystery, has shown us no hostility and, caution aside, should therefore be treated as a guest. With good fortune, we will soon learn more about him, and if his plight is genuine, hopefully we will be able to lend our assistance. Dismissed. Dash 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 dash. The door chime had the doctor jumping just a little, head swiveling to the door. Clearing his throat and turning the screen deliberately towards the washroom, where it wasn't in the sight of the door, he climbed to his feet, tugged at his sleeves and then announced, come in. The doors hissed open to reveal Deanna Troi, and the shoulders of the two guards who had been assigned to flank the door on the outside. Stepping inside, she waited until the doors had closed before turning her full attention on the Time Lord, giving him a small, friendly smile, even as her extrasensory perceptions strained to read past the unpredictable energy that seemed to perpetually bubble on the surface of the doctor's emotions. Doctor, she greeted, head bowing. How are you feeling? Oh, much better, came the chipper reply, as he gestured vaguely to the screen, shifting to the center of the room. Just been catching up on my reading, as it were. Would you care to have a seat? Thank you, she replied graciously, shifting to settle onto the couch. The Time Lord chose the comfortable recliner just beside it, crossing his leg over his knee a bit awkwardly as his thin limbs sought to find some proper posture. At the end of it, he just looked like he's been stuffed into the plush cushions. There was a long, full minute of silence as the doctor stared at her, clearly waiting for her to say something, but she just watched him, patient, clearly waiting to see what he would do. So, the Time Lord shifted on his chair a little, lips quirking in a small smile as he realized he was actually feeling a bit uncomfortable. You're the ship's counselor. Are you really the only one aboard? Yes, I am, she replied, inclining her head just once. Impressive. He paused, lips pursing, then pointed at her, eyes narrowing dramatically. With over 1,000 people on this vessel, your schedule must be dreadfully hectic. Sometimes, she replied, smiling widely. I prefer to think of it as rewarding, or at the very least it keeps me from growing restless. I take it you've been utilizing the ship's library. Fascinating, it truly is, the doctor replied, Settling back onto the plush chair, I skimmed through your anthropological files, didn't want to embarrass myself in front of any unfamiliar races again, but the material was a bit dry. So much more exciting to meet new races face to face. I did very much enjoy your crew manifest and the service records within, however, always been a personal fascination of mine, life stories and the like. I see, Troy replied, nodding. Whose service records did you examine? Oh, he replied breezily, all of them. The entire crew manifest. Troy echoed blankly, even though she could sense no deception from it, she wasn't entirely sure if she could believe it. And just how much have you learned from it? Well, for one, Ensign Taggart in engineering most certainly deserves a promotion, the doctor replied idly, headed the last 7 shipwide diagnostics, and helped coordinate the refit and repair after your encounter with the Borg. Absolute crime that she isn't a lieutenant by now, no matter what discipline problems she's been reported for. I'll pass that on to Commander LaForgue, Troy replied slowly. I must confess, I am more than a little impressed. Oh, my people are quick learners, always have been. In fact, I do believe someone once described me as having higher alien intelligence. He paused right after that admittedly proud statement before adding in a mumble, well, hair of an idiot, too, but if you saw her style of do, you wouldn't be taking her word for it. Something about the way he said it suggested not just embarrassment, but a certain fond nostalgia, and she didn't have to be empathic to realize the very mention had saddened him. Are you all right? No, it's all right. The doctor smiled a little, but it was a very small, very old smile. They were just better times. Sensing that it was perhaps a subject that would not be received well, she chose a different tack. You spoke of your people, can you tell me about them? That proved to be a terrible mistake, as the sudden spasm of pain, guilt and anger that roared from the doctor's psyche like wildfire at the subject all but froze the breath in her throat. Even though the Time Lord hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't even twitched, well, to Troy the emotional barrage felt as if he had lunged across the room to grab her by the throat. My people, he replied quietly, his face seeming to age 50 years at their very mention, even as a hand awkwardly tugged at his bow tie. With all due respect, counselor, those were considerably worse times. I'd rather not discuss them. As you wish. Troy had edged away in her seat a bit, as if seeking physical distance from the pain that leaked from him like pus from a boil, but as it slowly faded to a dull throb, she relaxed a little. Your arrival here was accidental, wasn't it? The doctor shook himself slightly from his thoughts, turning his attention back to her. Oh, yes, all considered, the fact that my atoms aren't scattered halfway across the galaxy is a very positive thing. Good day, so far. From what the captain has told me, the very actions that brought you here could be considered reckless, Troy pointed out, hesitating for a moment before adding, I hope you don't take offense, but in my experience, when people undertake such extensive risks, they either seek to brush against death for the thrill, or welcome it with open arms. Could either possibly apply to you? Something flickered in his eyes at that, there for just a moment before hidden behind the usual mischievous glimmer. She was obviously hitting far too many buttons, and she could all but feel the emotional wall go up, sealing his true feelings behind a shroud of enthusiasm and sparkling wit. No, I imagine death will find a way of reaching me without my help, he finally replied, trying to sound as casual as he could. It reaches us all, doesn't it? It would be more accurate, I think, to say that I enjoy making my mark on history. Being the first to succeed at something like that would certainly have been a feather in my cap. Troy nodded at that, but didn't look convinced, not quite, but just as she was opening her mouth to try another tack, her communicator chirped. Counselor Troy, Data's voice piped through, please report to the bridge. On my way. Getting back to her feet, she gave the doctor another smile. I'm sorry to leave so soon, but we're arriving at our destination, the Enterprise has an assignment to complete, and the captain needs all senior officers present. An assignment? The doctor asked, putting on his best charming smile as he rose to his feet as well, mind if I pop up there with you? I do enjoy helping, and I might go natters stuck in this room all day. I was also hoping to speak to your captain about the condition of my TARDIS. Troy smiled softly, but shook her head. I'm afraid the operation we're undertaking is very delicate. All non-essential personnel are being asked to remain in their quarters until its completion. It should only be a few hours. I'd be happy to come back and resume our discussion afterwards, if you'd like. And I will be certain to inform the captain that you wish to speak with him." The doctor's smile faded a little, but he nonetheless bobbed his head agreeably. "Of course. Thank you, counselor. Dash 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 dash." By the time Troy had departed, the smile had faded entirely, replaced with a small, pensive frown. "Non-essential," he muttered, brow quirked. "Another first. Least she didn't look at the monitor." All right, he had fibbed a little. Not even fibbed, just failed to mention that the crew manifest and approved anthropological database hadn't been the only information he'd been learning. Though most other files were restricted, he hadn't had any difficulty, with some sonic help, bypassing their security measures and accessing the real treasure trove. Technical schematics, star charts, even command codes and security procedures. In his defense, it wasn't like he was planning to do anything with them, though the schematics were giving him some thoughts about refitting the TARDIS for operation in this universe. Rather, it was the very fact that they were locked away, sealed behind access codes and firewalls. He'd always had a terrible weakness for secret things, and the more hidden a nugget of information was, the more obsessively he tried to possess it. Besides which, as kind as these people appeared, he'd been in more than enough dangerous situations to know that an escape plan was always advisable. He was learning, at a truly unprecedented pace, if only because it had been so long since there had been so much to learn. But this talk of submission niggled at his curiosity, so it was with a grunt that he plopped onto the chair in front of the computer monitor, kicking up his feet and resting them on the desk. "Computer, show me all information relating to this ship's current assignment. That information is restricted to senior staff and all applicable personnel. Are we really going to have to do this every time?" Rolling his eyes, he lifted his sonic screwdriver, and it buzzed, hummed and clicked for a few long moments. "How about now? Displaying. I thought so." Information began to flick on the screen. Files, first, the mission briefing, as well as some information on specialized personnel and equipment that had been transferred to the Enterprise during her last pit stop for its completion. He flitted through it in minutes, filing everything away in his vast memory, but he was already getting a little bored, until he came across the last set of files. They were scans of the Alcharan system's sun, displaying the elevated heat and radiation pouring from it, along with an analysis and theory as to the cause. Whoever had assembled the report had postulated that the development, though regrettable, was natural, the result of the star's self-consumption reaching a denser layer of fuel. But as the Time Lord's eyes flickered from that analysis to the details of the scans themselves, including one that the Enterprise's own sensors had just uploaded, he felt panic stir in his chest. "Oh, no." Licking his lips, the doctor raised his voice, glancing up at the ceiling. "Computer, can you put me in touch with the bridge?" "Affirmative. Do it." He waited a few seconds before realizing it had probably been done and calling out, "Hello up there. Doctor, we are about to begin an extremely time-sensitive operation," came the slightly irritated reply from Picard. "I am afraid we don't have the time to discuss your vessel's care with you at the moment." "Yes, understandable, utterly so, but if I just might have a quick little W." "I am afraid it will have to wait until we're finished here." Picard out. Damn. Jaw tightening, the doctor leapt to his feet, head swiveling first left, then right. He started to pace back and forth across the room, muttering under his breath, fingers twirling his sonic screwdriver. And then, in a shrill, blood-curdling high pitch, he approached the cabin door and screamed, "Oh God, something's in here with me." The pair of guards were through the door in a flash, phasers out, eyes swiveling alertly across the room. So alertly, in fact, that they completely failed to realize the Time Lord had pressed himself up against the wall, just inside the doorway. The moment they had stepped inside, he was slipping out, hand slapping the door control to shut it. Out popped his sonic screwdriver, a quick pass over the control panel ensuring the guards would have a bugger of a time getting out again. Still, it wasn't going to keep them from using their little communicators to seek reinforcements, so the doctor was off like a flash, backtracking the path data had originally led him, until he found the turbolift he'd ridden down to this deck. Stepping inside, he tucked his sonic screwdriver away in his jacket pocket, tugging at his collar as he tried to plan just how he was going to get his point across the most urgently. "Take me to the bridge." Dash 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 dash. Captain, I sensed great sadness from him, Troy was confiding, a mere moment after the doctor's communique had interrupted their discussion. Seated on the bridge, the remainder of the crew were busy at work, beaming personnel and material down to the surface of Alcharon V's colony. It is buried under layers of mania and determination, as if he were seeking simply to ignore the feelings, but they are there. When I spoke to him of death, I also sensed genuine fear at the concept, not simply unease at the idea of dying, but dread at its very mention. It could be that he considers himself in some form of mortal danger. From us, or someone else? Picard asked, brow furrowing. I cannot say, Troy admitted. But if you wish my overall examination, he is far, far more than he appears. And far more than he acts. Which is saying something, all considered, Picard muttered, settling into his chair. Thank you, Counselor. After this operation is concluded, I'll report to Starfleet Command on the incident, perhaps they have information that could shed some more light. In the meantime, I'd like you to. Security to Lieutenant Worf. Everyone on the bridge reflexively turned towards the Chief of Security, with Picard all but twisting in his chair to do so. Looking more than a little surprised at the sudden influx of attention, the Klingon cleared his throat before tapping his com badge. Worf here. Sir, our guest just broke out of his quarters. Broke out. Worf's fingers tightened reflexively around the crescent railing above his console. Were either of you injured? No, sir, he didn't attack, he sort of tricked us. Sir. Worf's brows were descending like thunderclouds, and his voice was little more than a growl. Tricked you. We thought that. Close transmission, Picard barked, climbing to his feet. Computer, location of the Enterprise's newest occupant. Most recent occupant is in Turbolift 12C, the computer replied primly. What is the destination of the T? The answer didn't come from the computer, but from the hiss of the turbolift doors, behind the captain's chair near the engineering console. Out burst the frantic, fidgeting Time Lord, bowtie askew, eyes very wide and flitting about before locking on the very, very angry Picard. Captain, he announced, starting to make his way down the ramp, it is vital that I speak with you. Doc. The final word turned into a strangled gasp as Worf wrapped an arm around the doctor from behind, squeezing him across the ribs and half hoisting him into the air. The Time Lord proved considerably more heavy than expected, however, and his feet slowly sank back onto solid footing, though no matter how sharply he wriggled, he couldn't break free. Doctor, this is highly outrageous. Picard snapped, I told you we would discuss this matter after the conclusion of our assignment. Mr. Worf, take him back to his quarters, seal him in there if you have to. You're making a ludicrously disastrous mistake. The doctor protested, heels digging into the carpet as Worf bodily dragged him back towards the turbolift. The Klingon's lips were drawn back in a snarl because, though he wouldn't admit it to anyone, this half-starved looking stick of a man was quite a bit stronger than he looked. Picard had already turned away, in the meantime, determined to ignore the gibbering intruder, but the man's next words stopped him dead in his tracks. And it's going to get every single colonist on that planet killed.